lowest, greatest, highest, I will come to thee.
In the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon teaches us how hopeless man is without God. Let's examine the following verses that were made into a song in the 1960s. Ecclesiastes 3, verse number 1. To everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven, a time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck what is planted, a time to kill, and a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, and a time to laugh, a time to mourn, and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to gain, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to throw away, a time to tear, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. These 14 opposites continue with the theme of this book about how each person goes through similar events just as the wind blows and the sun rises and sets. Solomon is saying that man has no control of what's going to happen to him over time, which is true in a general sense. Of course, there are some things that we can control, such as how we live our lives, but many of the things that come our way, we have no control over. For example, we have no control over of when we're going to be born. With the exception of committing suicide, we don't know when we're going to die. Even when someone has a terminal illness and a doctor will give that person 2 to 4 months to live, he really doesn't know because sometimes he might guess right, while other times he may be way off. Since God has set forth the seasons we live by, we also have a time that we must plant in order for stuff to grow. And then there is a time for the harvest. Obviously, if we try to resist what God has put into place and plant something in the winter, it will not grow. Or if we decide to harvest a crop before it is ready or when it's too late, that won't work either. The only way that we can be successful is by working with God's timing. There is also a time to kill, such as killing an animal so that we can eat. It would be foolish of us to go around just killing animal after animal and letting them all go to waste. We are to make the most of what God has given us to eat. As we live our lives, we will experience different emotions such as weeping and mourning as we lose a loved one or when we feel compassion toward our brothers and sisters in Christ who have suffered hardship or loss. There will also be a time for laughter and dance, which expresses joy for good things that happen to us or to our brethren. We are taught this basic thought in 1 Corinthians 12, verse 26. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. Romans 12, verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice, and weep with those who weep. It is hard to tell what Solomon was talking about when he said it was time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones. Some see this as a military reference. The casting away of the stones refers to how they would throw stones to destroy another. The gathering of stones would refer to preparing the way for a military victory, such as found in Isaiah 62 in verse number 10. Others view it as a farming reference. The casting away of stones would be when the farmer realizes the field he is trying to clear of rocks has too many. So he throws the stone back down to go look for a better piece of land. The gathering of stones would be him removing the stones from some land he intends to plant. Whatever was intended by this saying, it still shows that it has a certain time when it is to be done. He also says there is a time to show affection by embracing and a time not to do that. For example, when it comes to worshiping God or we are in a public place, it is not the time for a husband and wife to embrace in the way they would in private. Though some couples disregard this simple principle, it should be done in its proper place. Next, he says, a time to gain and a time to lose, and a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to sow. Sometimes in our lives, things are going good and we gain. But sometimes things go bad and we lose. And depending on the time, there may be things that we want to keep. But once they serve no purpose, there's a time to throw them away. If we always try to keep everything, we will end up buried in junk, and we might find ourselves on that reality show called Hoarders. There are many ways we could look at a time to tear and a time to sow. But the basic idea behind this is that sometimes we have to tear things down, such as a condemned building. But other times it's time to sew it up or repair it. Again, if a building is maybe not that bad a shape, it just needs a little bit of repair, then you would fix it instead of tearing it down. This next one is a good one. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. There are times when it's best not to say a word, but many times we speak anyway because it is kind of our nature to do this. But this ends up usually causing us more problems than we hope for. On the other side of that, there are times when we should not be silent, but speak out, especially when it comes to speaking out for what is right in the sight of God. James gives us the best advice on knowing when to speak and when to be silent. James 1:19, "So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." We must also learn that there is a time to love and a time to hate. As Christians, love should always be the main motivation in our lives. But the Bible also teaches us to hate the evil way. Romans 12, verse number 9. "Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good." Finally, he says there is a time of war and a time of peace. Now, as Christians, we are to strive to be at peace with others. But it's not always possible because man has a way of creating war even with those who do not desire it. So war and peace will always be a part of our lives in one form or another. While we cannot control everything that is going to happen to us in life, we can face each day with great confidence, knowing that God is on our side and knowing that heaven will be our home if we simply live each day for God and keep our trust in Him. If we can follow these simple principles I have laid out, life will be much easier for all of us.